In this edition of reShape 333, I want to give to you an agenda item for your next leadership team meeting. It's an agenda item, in fact, that I think can be added again and again and again and again. I think it will be helpful, and I want to give it to you in the next 333 seconds. So let's get at it. Stephen Covey died in 2012, and he made a statement many years before that. He said, reinvent yourself every 3 years so that you can remain relevant and so that you can make contributions in a world of constant change. He said that reinvention is the key to longevity. I would argue that that's true, but I would also argue that Stephen Covey's 3-year reinvention rule probably now is about 18 months. Things change so rapidly now, and to be relevant as the church, while your core beliefs and your values can't change, your methods must. In fact, there must be what I would call at every leadership meeting a time of what I would call reinvention road. It becomes an off-ramp where you begin to dream and you begin to consider what might be. And you take that off-ramp for 30 minutes to begin talking about some of those things. It's a creative and an imaginative moment in your meeting that will not happen unless you write it into your agenda. The reinvention road item. You know, when my kids were growing up, some of you remember that show that was all the rage called Barney. Every episode of Barney had a segment called Imagination Station. And at the Imagination Station, they would dream and imagine and enter new places together. And I would argue that what we need in our day is some time at an imagination station, or what I would like to call that reinvention road segment of our leadership team meeting. A 30-minute chunk of time where we set time aside to evaluate and to dream and to imagine and reinvent. You remember when COVID showed up way back now? It was a chapter of forced reinvention, really. And how do we do our Sunday service now? How do we serve our community now? How do we shop now? How do we exercise now when the gyms aren't open? How do we eat out when you can't go out? How do we care for people now? It was a chapter of forced reinvention, and churches did it. Churches reinvented themselves in a few short months, even a few short weeks, because they had to. Churches didn't close. Church services happened. People were still served. We figured out how to do it. People were cared for. Neighbors were served. Reinvention happened during that chapter. But as we move a little further into 2023, and the COVID chapter becomes a little bit more distant in our rearview mirror, have we forgotten that lesson already? Have we allowed ourselves to begin to settle back? Has your leadership team drifted back into what is known? Have we settled back toward the comfortable? It's the natural tendency, because reinvention is really hard work. Think about it. Have you abandoned those online folks that were connecting with you virtually every Sunday? Oh, not fully, but now they simply get we welcome our online viewers. Welcome, but then the service goes on and many of them are forgotten. Are you neglecting now maybe some of those that might have connected in a home group or in a small group during that COVID chapter? And during that chapter, they found real church there, real connection there. But now the expectation is that they'll find their way through your Sunday church doors. Did you figure out creative ways to serve your neighbors, to serve your community during a chapter of isolation? But now, has energy started to shift back toward making Sunday happen once again, and more internal priorities? You see, the gift of COVID, I would argue, was a chapter of forced reinvention, and reinvention must become our common posture in a day of constant change. So here's what I'd say. Don't click away. There's some questions that are going to be coming up on your screen to force your leadership team to begin to have some creative and imaginative discussion about forced reinvention and reinventing ourselves. Have some fun.